Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. And who doesn't love a World War II mystery investigation? Garth and Chris, the co-authors of Sabotage, join us on the channel to talk about the crash of a Liberator in 1943 that resulted in the death of commander of the Polish army and leader of the government-in-exile, General Sikorsky. Links for the book can be found in the description below. I'll also put up a QR code that takes you straight through to their publisher's website, but I'll bring the two guys in there. Sorry for the delay, a few technical issues, but we're all back up and running. Good afternoon, Garth and Chris. How are you both today?
Good afternoon. Good, thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to be here. Good to have you here. So, without further ado, I'll basically start this off really because you've got a lot of information on your slides, and the two of you have done this incredible work on this. And I'm going to reference the last slide already because it's an ongoing project. You know, it's one of those things. It's not like you've drawn a complete line under this and said, "Yeah, done, mic drop, walked out." It's an ongoing thing, which I think lends itself to something like World War II TV because you never know. There might just be that person watching who says, you know what, I've got another little piece of the puzzle. And just before we start beginning, is that how it's been for you over these last few years and working on this, where one little thing leads to another thing? I mean, Garth, let's bring you in first.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I was lucky enough to present World War II Air Crash Detectives, where we one of the episodes we looked into the Sikorsky crash. And as you know, with anything TV-wise that's an hour long, that's actually 45 minutes of airtime. And literally, we didn't scratch the surface. All we were able to do was look at the conspiracy theories and put quite a few of those to bed. But actually finding out what happened, that it didn't happen then. So then moving on, as we'll explain later, we got other leads, and they moved on again and moved on again. And eventually we got through all the conspiracy theories to a theory that is plausible, and where I'll bring Chris in on that. And so it's left us wide open. And the book really is to shake the tree and see what falls from it more than, as you say, a definitive conclusion.
And would you concur, Chris?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, as Garth pointed out, he kind of dealt with the investigative side in his earlier, he had done an earlier documentary. And then once we got together, I kind of pursued the technical side, and also trying to sort of trace down a little bit of the history of Sikorsky and the saboteur himself and other people that are involved. Regarding the history of Sikorsky, it's more very generalized history. There's better sources about him out there. So.
Well, brilliant. Well, I guess without further ado, we should start off. So, as I said, folks, the links to the book are in the description below. Here are the bios of the two authors. So, tell us a bit about. Well, I'll hand it over to the two of you to take us through the show. So, I think it's Chris. You're starting, aren't you?
Well, actually, we'll start with Garth because he can talk a little bit more about himself because he kind of started all this with his documentary.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I've always been involved in air crash investigation since the age of 10 when I worked at a local airfield, and a gentleman who was a World War II veteran came over and said he was stationed up at RAF to Western during the war, and he said, "I see those trees over there. A plane crashed in those trees. But whatever you do, don't go over there." And age 10, that sort of lit the pilot light, and from that point on was any aircraft I could find, I was looking into. It was very difficult back then, 1980. Very difficult to get information. It was purely local knowledge, and then fast forward sort of 30 years, 40 years, then obviously the advent of the internet made life a lot easier. Going up and down to Hendon and what was the National Archives at the time, I was able to conduct a lot of research. And that led me on to then doing local talks for historical societies, which then led on to the World War II Air Crash Detectives. And they're looking into the Sikorsky crash. I'm quite naive. I didn't really know that much about the crash, which I was told was a good thing. I hope that would lead to a good presenting. I'm not so sure about that. But either way, I got involved with that, and I was hoping to have a conclusion, and we just didn't. So hence why I continued my research after that. And then a bit further down the line, me and Chris met, and it went from there.
Brilliant. And Chris?
So how did I get involved? Well, a little bit about myself, I guess. I'm a retired aircraft maintenance engineer, Canadian aircraft maintenance engineer. I live here in Calgary, Alberta. It's 37 years of experience, retired from Air Canada Jazz. Worked on a lot of aircraft, everything from like Cessnas and Pipers up to DC-3s and DC-4s. And I'm also an administrator at the Cressy Siberia Facebook page. And at some point on the page, there'd been something about Sikorsky's death. I'd made a comment about it, and a gentleman from Australia said, "Well, I know a little bit more about this," and so we started chatting a little bit. And he said, "Yeah, my father put my father's responsible for the crash," and he had mentioned that Garth Barnard he'd been speaking with Garth Barnard, and next thing you know, me and Garth got connected and started exchanging information, and I eventually started digging into this and found out that it is technically plausible to jam the controls, the flight control, the elevator controls on a consolidated Liberator.
Brilliant stuff. Well, there we are. Well, I'm in charge of the slides. And folks, if you do have questions, fire away. But I think a lot of the information or the questions you ask will be answered as we go along. But that doesn't mean you can't ask them. But I'll hand over to the two of you. So off we go.
Thank you. So just a little bit about Sikorsky. He was born on the 20th of May, 1881. Of course, passed away on July 4th, 1943. In the early years of the Second Republic, he had fought in the Polish-Soviet War. He was the prime minister at one point, then later served as the minister of military affairs. After the Joseph Pudlinski May 26 coup, he fell out of favor with the new regime. Him and Pudlinski didn't exactly see eye to eye on how to approach certain issues. During the September campaign, or just after the September campaign, near the end, and he was appointed Prime Minister and Minister of War and Exile. On November 7th, he was then appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Armed Forces after the resignation of Marshal Radzic Smigli. Next slide, please. And then in August of 1940, he signed a military agreement with Britain to reconstitute the Polish army in the UK. In 1941, July 30th, he signed a treaty with the Soviets canceling the Soviet-German agreement, and Polish POWs and deportees were released, which enabled the Polish army to be reconstituted in Russia. In August of that year, he appointed General Wladyslaw Anders as commander-in-chief of the commander of the Polish army in Russia. In March of that same year, he sailed to Canada and the United States aboard HMS Revenge, and it was his first meeting with Roosevelt. Next slide, please. And in October of that year, he flew to Moscow via Gibraltar, Cairo, Lydda, and Baghdad for a meeting with Stalin to discuss the deposition of the Polish army and its deportees. In March of 1942, he flew to Montreal for a meeting again with President Roosevelt. And November 29th, he flew to Montreal and Washington again for a meeting with Roosevelt to discuss Polish war and post-war aims. Next slide, thank you. May 25th, 1943, he flew to from the UK to the Middle East for the inspection tour of the Polish forces in Palestine and Iraq. And of course, on July 4th, July 3rd, landed in Gibraltar on the final leg of his return flight to the UK, and he was received by General Mason McFarlane. And of course, here we see a picture of the submerged wreckage of AL523. So his Liberator 2 aircraft crashed 16 seconds after takeoff at 23:07 hours. All aboard were killed, with the exception of the pilot, Flight Lieutenant Prchal, who was severely injured with 2 broken legs. Next slide, please. Overview of Sikorsky's earlier flights. So in May of 1940, he flew from Poole to Lake Bacassa, France, on a Boac Sunderland, where he to gather members of the Polish General Staff, and to bring them back along with 25,000 evacuated Polish troops. Sorry, go ahead. Somebody say something? So carry on. Curious, a little side note: he tried to order the pilot, a fellow named Don Bennett, to not leave without him, even if there was to leave without him on the lake. And even though there was he was told if there's an air attack, I'm leaving you behind. This quite distressed Sikorsky. On October 31st of 41 to January 6th of 42, he flew to Russia via Gibraltar, Malta, Cairo, Lida, Baghdad, Tehran, and then on to Baku and Moscow. And then on November 25th, during that trip, during some bad weather, caused an air turn back, and a safe landing was made at the satellite airfield near Hamadan, Iran. And again, Sikorsky was distressed by this delay, but curiously, this was one of the first, somebody had cited this as a possible sabotage attempt or assassination attempt. It was not. Next slide, please. Also, okay, one curious thing too, during that trip to the Middle East, he'd gone to Tobruk to visit Polish troops holding the line there, and he had brought 25 cases of whiskey with him aboard a British destroyer. And this was a gesture that he would made to the troops there, but it also kind of influenced stories about contraband in the later crash in Gibraltar. So on March 21st, he flew from Prestwick to Montreal, Washington, along with 12 passengers, 5 crew aboard a BOAC Liberator. And 8 hours into the flight, there was one of the passengers, Wing Commander Kleksinski, was seen going to the rear of the aircraft. There was a burning smell noted by some passengers. On arrival in Montreal, he claimed to have found a bomb, and that he said it felt hot. Next slide, please. Okay. And there's an X-ray of the bomb that the Americans took. The British investigators determined that the bomb was British-made, incendiary, and Kleksinski admitted making up the story, and he was very apologetic and remorseful. And sadly, he suffered from a lot of psychological issues and some addiction issues due to wounds, but he was not court-martialed. He went on to lecture at the Polish Air Force Academy in Scotland, and he died on March 20th, 1944 of encephalitis and pneumonia after surgery. He was not pushed in front of a tram or run over. Anyway. Okay, so on November 30th, 1942, trip from Montreal to Washington, Sikorsky was flown in a Lockheed Hudson. The aircraft, shortly after takeoff, both engines lost power and landed wheels up in a field. Nobody was injured, just a couple of bumps and bruises. Post-crash investigation determined that there was no evidence of fuel starvation or sabotage, and it was likely just carburetor icing. Next, thank you. So why was Sikorsky traveling to the Middle East? So there was several issues he was facing. There was this discovery in the Katyn woods of mass graves containing the remains of Polish officers. One of those being a great uncle of mine, my Uncle Joseph. Sikorsky demanded an investigation by the International Red Cross, but at the same time, the Germans had also made a similar demand. The British government was unwilling to risk their alliance with the Soviet Union and pressured the Poles to withdraw their request. Sikorsky agreed to an independent inquiry instead. April 25th, the Soviets broke off diplomatic relations with the Poles, accusing them of allying with the Russians in an effort to extract border concessions. There was much unrest and dissent among the Polish forces towards Sikorsky. The discontent centered around his diplomacy with the Russians and a failure to address the eastern border issue with the Soviets. And also, too, they were quite put off that his failure to demand an inquiry of the Katyn massacre. The trip's purpose was an inspection tour of the Polish forces in Iraq and Palestine to reassert his authority and to calm agitation and put to rest all rumors about plots against him.
Oops, sorry.
The pilot, Edward Prchal.
Yeah.
Next slide.
We go. Yeah.
So he was born in January 1st, 1911 in Dolin Brzeziny near Prague. In October of 1930, he joined the Czech Air Force. From October to October 1932 to May 1937, he accumulated approximately 1,040 flying hours, of which 300 were at night. In 1937, he joined the Czechoslovak company Bata in Zlin. They had commercial aircraft. They had a commercial aircraft fleet. He flew a further 1,260 hours. In June of 1943, after the occupation of Czechoslovakia, he went to Poland, and then from there he went to France, arriving on the 30th of June. And he joined the French Air Force and was sent on a Bloch MB-152 fighter conversion course. During the Battle of France, he scored 3 aerial victories, 2 of which were shared. In June 1940, he was evacuated to England and joined the RAF Volunteer Reserve. He was sent on a hurricane conversion course and posted to 310 Czechoslovak Squadron at Duxford in July. During the Battle of Britain, he scored 4 victories, 2 of which were shared, and he was wounded and belly landed his damaged Hurricane. He was also awarded the Czechoslovak War Cross twice. March of 41, he was posted to number 55 OTU, Operational Training Unit, as a fighter pilot instructor. In July, posted to number 54 OTU and sent on a night fighter course. In August, he was posted to number 255 Squadron for training on the twin-engine Bristol Beaufighters. Next slide, please.
Yep, done.
Oh, there it is. Apologies. Large, small. Okay. In September of 41, he was posted to number 68 Night Fighter Squadron, and December was promoted to pilot officer. In January 1942, he was promoted to flying officer, and he flew 4 operational patrols. In September 41 to April 42, he and other pilots, they maintained their night interception skills through night flying tests, cross-country flights, night and dusk landings, CGI practice and calibration, searchlight cooperation, radar intercept, and the like. And 1942 was posted to 116 Squadron, and then from June to number 1425 flight in flying Lockheed Hudsons, and flying at night from Portsmouth, UK, Gibraltar, Malta, and then back. From 17 June to 30 December, he made 12 flights to Gibraltar, 14 flights to Malta, totaling 183 hours, flying hours. December 1942, he was promoted to flight lieutenant and posted to number 511 Squadron, where he flew passengers, freight, VIPs to the Middle East and the Far East in the consolidated Liberator 2.
I want to speak to Garth for a second.
I think just about to jump in, because it's really worth noting that the caliber of Prchal, his experience, and how good a pilot he actually was. And that's why he stood out, and that's why Sikorsky chose him. Right. This wasn't somebody. This wasn't a chancer. This wasn't someone that's had pranks here, there, and everywhere. He was a seasoned pro. He knew what he was doing, and he was a very, very good pilot. And as we go on, I think as we go through the slides now, and we sort of paraphrase a bit more and break it down and open this up, you'll see that actually that Prchal. And why he was chosen, and that's why some of the conspiracy theories just seem so daft, because he was such a good pilot.
Okay, but I just wanted to ask you, Garth, is there anything in Sikorsky's flights previous to this one that would raise any kind of questions with you as an air crash investigator? Because, I mean, we think of today, there's millions of flights going around the world every bloody month, and most of them are without hitch. Back then, your world leaders, your Churchills and everyone, they're hopping on different types of aircraft pretty much all the time. So I'm assuming that everybody who's flying around the world would at some point have odd cases of aircraft having to turn back and land, technical difficulties, things like that. Is there anything that so far that is unusual?
Do you know what? Yes, he did have his moments, but no, not unusual at all. Considering the caliber that he was, and the status rather that he was, then it was inevitable that there were going to be things that were going to happen. And were they deliberate or were they accidents? Obviously, people are going to think that, but nothing really stood out from that. There was opportunities as well. There were opportunities where he may have come to harm from somebody's influence, but in this instance, no, nothing really stuck out until this flight.
Okay, and Gary just, I mean, maybe this is going to be covered later on. Gary Giamara said, with his training as a night fighter pilot, rather specialized, why would he be transferred to lesser duty as a transport pilot, or was it because of Sikorsky recognizing his skills?
Actually, in our research, it's not really clear why. I suspect this is just may have been a career choice on his part. You could see obviously he joined in, like, I think it was 41 or 42. And I think this is just more of a progression on his part. It wasn't necessarily because Sikorsky wanted him on the squadron. He'd been flying for quite a while before he was asked to fly Sikorsky. So there's it was more of a career progression.
Okay, thanks.
The records.
Well, the saboteur, back to you guys.
Okay, so our saboteur, Wladyslaw Sikorski. So he was born in 1912 in Prchal, Poland. In the mid-30s, he was employed with Aviation Radio Company in Warsaw. He worked for a cryptologist, Maximilian Cizik. He joined the Polish military's Section 2 Cipher and Intelligence Bureau as an officer of the Border Protection Corps, called KOP. During the invasion of Poland, he was tasked with the escort of the British military mission and Polish Cipher Bureau out of Poland into Romania. He was captured after escorting the group to the Polish-Romanian border. He was a POW in Germany until escaping in early 1942, and he made his way to Poland. Joined the Musketeers as a Polish intelligence. Joined the Musketeers, which was a Polish intelligence organization formed in October of '39 in Warsaw by Captain Stefan Witkowski. In mid-1942, he joined the Polish resistance group. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. The military organization Lizard Union, and received sabotage training and participated in assassination of Nazi officials. Early '43, in the Middle East, he was attached to the Polish Army signals, and he was tasked with eliminating Sikorsky by Polish factions in the UK and the Middle East who were opposed to Sikorsky's policies with the Soviets and his yielding to British political pressure. In mid-May 1943, he was allegedly sent to Gibraltar as part of Sikorsky's protection detail. On May 25th, for reasons unknown, he failed to assassinate Sikorsky or sabotage his Liberator AL523 as it transited through Gibraltar. On July 4th, he's alleged to have been responsible for the crash of Liberator AL523 and the death of Sikorsky by the irregular use of a cotton rag to jam the elevator controls after conventional sabotage methods proved unworkable.
So this guy, it was actually his son that contacted me in early 2015, and it's Peter Abansky, and he started off quite slowly, giving me his information, and he was able to talk through what brought the aircraft down. Now, at this point, I had gone through all the conspiracy theories. I mean, everything from Prchal's putting on his May West, so he was anticipating ditching, which was, if you think of a pilot of his caliber, flying directly into the sea, nose first. Obviously, he's going to be probably the first person to be killed on board. So why would he put on a May West jacket? Also, you got the rock itself. He could have flown into the rock itself. So he wasn't complicit in that. And there were other things like they said everyone on board had been shot. This started with a rumor that a pistol was found on the apron. We know a pistol was waved around during the loading of the aircraft. We know that, and that would have led on to those conspiracy theories, but no one was shot. I went to the IPN, and I was very lucky to look at the autopsy photos that was carried out. And although I'm no expert, there were no what I would consider to be bullet wounds in any of the uniforms or any of the details of the autopsy. Nothing there would lead to that. The mail bag that we'll come on to that, which they found on the runway, which suggested the aircraft was easily, if a mail bag can fall out, then the aircraft is easily accessible to put a bomber on board.
Right.
or something like that, that the aircraft was overweight, again, which we'll come on to, or the center of gravity had been shifted. So all of these have been put to one side. I mean, we got through all of those, and it had gone quiet for me, and it wasn't till Peter Urbanski got in contact with me, and we started off slowly with who could have done this, and again, it's feasible. And then he come with a how it was done, which was, in my mind, debatable. And I'm thinking, well, I've gone through the conspiracy theories, and I've proven them not to be true, so this must be another one. Let's have a go at this one. And this is where Chris came in, because Chris, I'll let Chris explain the RAG, which was the aircraft was brought down using a RAG, which I thought couldn't have done. But then over to Chris, and Chris did a lot of testing, and Chris was able to show, and maybe we'll talk you through how he tested that and found how a RAG could bring down a Liberator.
Yeah. So after I had spoken with Peter Urbanski, and then he'd read his dad's biography and the claim that he'd made about the using a RAG, I was really doubtful. Being an aircraft technician, like, yeah, I've seen FOD cause these kind of problems. And so it was in the middle of COVID. And so first thing I did is I wrote up I made some drawings, wrote up a theory, and, theorized that, how a RAG could possibly jam an elevator. The curious thing was that Peter didn't really know how his father had done it. All his father had said is, I put a RAG in a flap. And it's like, nah, that's not going to do it. Like, once I read how the aircraft crashed, no, he would have had to do this, put this in an elevator. But then after examining, looking through all the technical manuals, the flight manuals, and I'm looking at this, it's like, I don't really think this is possible. And then I had noted that, and you'll see in the later on when I built a replica eventually to try and prove my theory. So I wrote this theory up, gave it to Garth, and he said, yeah, very nice drawings, explained how it gets caught in these channels. Again, you'll see the drawings earlier. But is it going to work? Like, very nice, but is it going to work? And I said, okay, I'll leave that with me, because at one point I had said to Garth, because we were going back and forth on this, I said, Garth, if I could just access a Liberator and get up there with a ladder and put a RAG in this location where I think it's going to jam, I could either shut down this whole thing or move it forward. So built a replica, and it took about a week or so. They found some drawings, scaled them up, built this huge cross-sectional replica in a friend's shop. And so here goes nothing. Put it in, pulled, and it was locking up. Okay, I must have done something wrong. So tried it again. Pulled, and it's locking up. Okay, I think we got something here. Did a video. You'll see it shortly.
Yep.
And then I sent it off to Garth, and Garth's like, okay, I think we have something here to work with. And then we carried on with our research and did more, and eventually got published.
Wow. Well, it's up to you when you want to play the video, or do you want to carry through all this sort of circumstantial?
I would like to carry through it just to sort of put things into context, because it is kind of important. I realize it does go on for a bit, but this just provides context and background.
Yep. No problem at all. Okay,
so there's two photographs here, and like the caption says, these photos are often miscaptioned as the last picture taken of Sikorsky before his death. They are not. The one on the left was taken in November 1941 during his Gibraltar stopover, and the one at the bottom was taken in sometime in 1942. He's stepping out of a number 24 VIP squadron, de Havilland Flamingo, and you see these two pictures constantly being referenced as as some dark omen. This is the last picture taken of him before he was killed. He was killed the following day, the minutes later. So anyway, next. So a little bit about Gibraltar. It's a British overseas territory located in the southern tip of Spain. It was ceded to Britain following the War of Spanish Succession. It's a naval base, and its ships played a key role in the supply of Malta throughout 1942. The airfield was opened in 1939 as a Fleet Air Arm emergency airstrip. and the runway was later extended to 1,800 yards into the Bay of Gibraltar with rock quarried from the tunnels. RAF North Front and RAF New Camp opened in 1942. And the airfield served as a base for anti-submarine patrol aircraft and air transit through to and from Britain and the Mediterranean. So Sikorsky did have a protection detail that went with him through the Middle East. He also had a protection detail in the UK. And the person responsible for his personal protection was a young Navy lieutenant called Joseph Pontekuski. He also served as his bodyguard. And so he was responsible for Sikorsky's personal security. The security force around him, when he traveled abroad, consisted of a senior adjutant and a duty adjutant, either or. He only had one adjutant on this trip, an information officer, an agent, or they also called him a courier. This is just another soldier. And then 3 military policemen. And interestingly enough, Pontekuski, he was killed in the crash.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so on arrival on July 3rd, Liberator AL523 arrived at 6:37 p.m. at North Front Airfield, and Sikorsky was greeted by Gibraltar's governor, Mason McFarlane. The number 27 ARDU looked through the aircraft, and then also it was serviced by number 511 Squadron's maintenance unit. Later in the day, a sentry was posted outside the aircraft, who was relieved every 2 hours, and an RAF airman was posted inside the aircraft overnight near the rear entrance. On July 4th at 7 a.m., Soviet Ambassador Ivan Maysky arrived at Gibraltar. His Boac Liberator 3 was parked next to Sikorsky's aircraft. The Maysky party was brought to the governor's residence, and Mason McFarlane made arrangements to put them in a separate wing away from the Sikorsky party until he departed. After breakfast, Maysky was taken on a quick sightseeing tour before departing Gibraltar at 11 a.m. Now, there's going to be people saying, well, that Maysky was somehow responsible for the crash. I highly doubt it, because there's also a lot of talk about Kim Philby, but these two fellows somehow manipulating the controls to somehow magically reverse them. Well, trust me, fixing airplanes for a living, it's a big job to try and reverse controls, especially without anybody noticing. There's a lot of work involved doing that.
And there's absolutely no evidence. There's absolutely no evidence that supports Maysky or any of his party or Kim Philby himself being on board. No evidence at all. Purely hearsay.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, Kim Philby. He was in London during this whole thing. So anyway. So at 1 p.m. at the governor's house, Sikorsky inspected the Somerset Light Infantry and also inspected 95 Polish soldiers who had been evacuated from Spain. His afternoon was spent touring Gibraltar's tunnels and defenses. Then at 6 p.m. at the Gibraltar Garrison Library, he celebrated the 167th anniversary of the American independence. He also sent a telegram to Roosevelt. 2 hours later, he returned to Government House for dinner, and there was a message for him from Flight Lieutenant Prchal that takeoff was scheduled for 11 p.m. And so he arrived at North Front, and the passengers boarded AL523. The aircraft taxied to the runways, West End, and for several minutes they did a prolonged engine run-up. And at 11:07 p.m., the aircraft took off, and Mason McFarlane and his staff waved as the aircraft flew past and climbed. The aircraft's navigation lights suddenly stopped climbing and began to descend, and the engines abruptly stopped, and then there was a loud bang. Next.
Yeah.
So searchlights started sweeping the water, and a rescue dinghy reached the crash site within 15 minutes. There were 2 survivors found, Brigadier Whiteley and Flight Lieutenant Prchal, who was wearing his life vest. Whiteley at the time was still alive, but he expired soon after. 20 minutes later, 2 rescue launches arrived off the eastern runway, and 2 more bodies were recovered, General Sikorsky and his Chief of Staff, General Klimicki. And the rescue launches continued searching for the survivors until 4:20. At this point, Sikorsky was alive, and he died in the arms of a flight lieutenant, or Flight Lieutenant Beaumont. We'll get to him later on. Of the 17 passengers and crew, only 11 bodies were recovered. 5 were never found, including Sikorsky's daughter, Sofia Lesanowska. From July 5th to the 16th, the wreckage was recovered and brought to Gibraltar's Gun Wharf dock, and the wreckage was inspected, dismantled, and moved to the north side of the airfield, where investigators conducted further examinations. And on July 7th, the court of inquiry into the crash was opened. Court of inquiry. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Yep.
And so this is the testimony that Prchal gave. I know I'm only going to cover a few things because it's a very long document. So I'm just going to do a couple of the highlights here. So Flight Lieutenant Prchal's takeoff description. I received the green light and signal at 23:10 hours and commenced to take off at about 130 miles per hour. I was airborne. When I was at about 150 feet, I used the control column forward to gather speed. My speed built up to 165 miles per hour. I wanted to climb again, so I attempted to pull back the control column, but I could not do so. The control column was definitely locked. I told my second pilot over the intercommunication to check over the controls quickly. At this time, the undercarriage was fully up and the flaps half down. That is normal takeoff position. When I found I was unable to move the control column, I put on trim in an endeavor to gain height, but nothing happened. All this time, I was pulling back on the control column, but could not move it backwards. Prchal was further asked if he had ever experienced locked elevator controls in previous occasions. He said yes, it had happened once to him. His rudder control had been inadvertently locked during takeoff, but he was successfully unlocked it and made a safe takeoff. He was then asked if he was wearing his Mae West life vest. He said no, he left it hung over his back seat. Obviously, he was found wearing it. Lieutenant Prchal he was asked about the mail bag found on the runway, and he speculated that it may have fallen from the nose undercarriage compartment. And then Wing Commander Stevens, he was the technical officer. He inspected the elevator chains. The Liberator's elevators were controlled by chains from the control column to cables, and he could find no evidence that they had been jammed by FOD. And there's a reason why he looked at that, because and Garth actually touched on this during the documentary. At the time there was a mysterious crash in the U.S. In San Diego Bay of AL523. It was the Liberator being flight tested, and what had happened there is they had some elevator control lock issues, and what they had found post investigation is that a piece of a machine screw had jammed the control chains. There was no evidence of this having happened on AL523. Next slide, thank you. Court of inquiry was adjourned on 19 July 1943. It was reconvened in the UK at Coastal Command headquarters on August 3rd, and the proceedings were closed August 8, 1943. The findings and conclusions were presented by Air Marshal Slessor on August 11th. It was found that Flight Lieutenant Prchal was not to blame for the accident, and there was no reason could be found for the elevators having locked up.
Right.
The official communique further added that there was no sabotage. Polish officials insisted on a revision stating that there was no. They wanted a revision that stated there was no question of sabotage. British officials did not revise their communique, repeating the same findings in their press. Now, some of the eyewitnesses. So at left, we have Flight Lieutenant Alan Beaumont. He was an off-duty flying control officer at Air Headquarters Gibraltar, and he was aboard RAF launch HL-181 during the survivor search. He's the fellow who held Sikorsky in his arms, and he expired in his arms. Right, we have Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Scrope, Assistant Quartermaster to General Cutterback, 1st Division, 8th Army. He was present on North Front the night of July 4th, 1943, and was told by RAF ground crew of an altercation between the AL523 flight crew and the Polish passengers and talked about the excess cargo that included liquor. This fellow Scrope, he was flying out to the UK on a B7 on an American B-17, and he had actually gone with another crewman. Had gotten off the aircraft, walked down the ramp to Sikorsky's aircraft to inquire about fuel. And when he asked an RAF ground crewman, "Is that General Sikorsky's aircraft?" He said, "Yes, they're having an argument. You know, there's the aircraft's overloaded. They're loading spirits, and there's somebody pulled out a pistol and started waving it around to kind of G things up." At left, we have leading aircraftman Charles Walker. He was an airframe mechanic, and he witnessed the unsupervised loading of the excess cargo on that evening. On the right, we have aircraftman Jack Waterfield, very interesting fellow that actually Garth got to chat with. Maybe Garth, you can tell us a little bit about Jack.
Yeah, I mean, just go back to Flight Lieutenant Alan Beaumont. His son contacted me shortly after with what he told me about his father and Sikorsky in the boat, which was just amazing to hear that. And Adrian Scrope was very, very helpful as well. He had an insight from his father, who had written notes and obviously contacted the poacher as well with what he saw on that night. But going on to Jack Waterfield, I mean, what a character. I interviewed him about, I think it was 2 years ago, I think it was, and he was 100 and something then, and he is sharp as a button, very, very good memory, very vivid, and could go into immense detail, and you could just ask him questions. I found that he was, he would, the way his memory worked, he'd start at the beginning, work all the way through, covering all bases, and I was able to just ask him the odd question in between. But it was interesting that he was stood with a colleague on the apron and witnessed a lot of the cargo being loaded on board by 2 Tilly trucks. They pulled up and they were loading sherry. So it was very chaotic. We've got to build this very chaotic picture here, because you had an aircraft that you had obviously the entourage, Sikorsky and his daughter, and his entourage on the aircraft. You had mailbags as well, which were going back to England. They were on board as well. And then, of course, all this sherry is now being put on board, and the engines are going. They're wound up, and they're nice and warm, or if not getting too hot, depends who you talk to. And so the mailbags are being thrown around. Hence why then they weren't where they should be. They weren't secure. Again, another conspiracy theory, which we'll come on to, on how a mailbag was found on the taxiway. But Jack said, he said it was just absolute chaos that night. And of course, tempers got a bit frayed. A pistol was waved around, told to load up the aircraft a lot quicker, and sherry, which come from a Siconian Speed warehouse. I managed to find out where that came from. It wasn't uncommon to do this either. So 2 Tilly trucks full of sherry, crates and crates and crates of sherry going on board. Very chaotic. Not a lot of space inside afterwards. Center of gravity being shifted. All this was going on, and I'm sure, as good as Prchal is as a pilot, I'm sure he was getting a bit concerned at this point with how much was going on board, center of gravity, just the chaos, and also tempers fraying. So the pressure was on. The pressure was really on. But I don't doubt he didn't do his due diligence in terms of aircraft checks before he took off. But anyway, that was Jack Waterfield, incredible guy and a very, very good witness.
And just a question for both of you: is it unusual that there were people who could have been asked what they saw to not be asked? I mean, I always remind myself, this is in the middle of the war. There are aircraft crashing all over the place at any one time. You can't possibly spend 6 months investigating every single aircraft that comes down. Obviously, this one has some senior officials on board, so therefore it's more important. But is there anything at this stage that is abnormal about the way the investigation was handled?
In short, yes. Because of the people I've spoken to, if they just had those people in the court of inquiry, it would have been very, very different.
Right.
Very, very different. You know, the picture that was painted, I'm sure was, in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, the fact that these people weren't called up or found or, you know, I mean, don't forget, these people approached me. I mean, they weren't that difficult to find, I'm sure. I'm quite shocked that they weren't approached and told that they would be given evidence in the court of inquiry. I'm very, very shocked. I still don't understand why that wasn't the case, other than there was sort of predetermined on what witnesses they wanted, what they were going to say, and how this was going to be perceived as an incident in terms of court of inquiry. But you know, you're absolutely right. Incredibly strange, and I can't answer that. I can't answer that. Okay. But these witnesses would have changed everything.
Okay, we've got a few questions about the crash. That if the details or the answers coming up later on, just say we're covering that later on. But I think I would like to deal with these now, just so that they don't pile up too much. So Robin is saying, where the aircraft is located in the water somewhere, has anyone been able to dive or take a dive craft down there? I mean, you know, the photo there you showed, it doesn't seem to be very far below the surface. So have people investigated the actual crash at the time or since?
So I think in 1978, the magazine After the Battle, they dove on the location. They pulled out a propeller, but the propeller that they found turned out to be not from AL523. AL523 had Curtiss Electric propellers. The propeller that they pulled out was a Hamilton Standard propeller, two very different operating systems. I know that Garth tried to make some inquiries at local diving shops in Gibraltar. Garth, that's your...
Well, I did speak to... I did try to track people down on Gibraltar itself. I've been there twice to research this further, and I couldn't actually find anyone to speak to. But since then, I've spoken to people who are divers that have dived on the east side, and they said the currents are absolutely horrendous. But that side, we'll come on to that in a minute, that the aircraft itself was lifted as much. They lifted as much wreckage as they could, and it was taken to Farnborough for investigation. And although they weren't specifically looking for that wreckage, they were in that vicinity. They didn't find anything. There was nothing else there. So I doubt if there's anything left. Who knows? I don't know. But I do know the currents are quite severe there.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one is Gordy asked, what were the weather conditions like at the time of the crash?
Fine. It was a clear night. I think it was 20 degrees Celsius, I believe, 20 degrees Celsius. Light wind coming right down the runway. It was a perfect night for flying. Okay, thank you. And Gaza asked, was there a co-pilot on board? There was. Squadron Leader Herring. Okay, thank you. I think that's all that we've got at the moment. I think others will be answered as you go on with this, but let's continue with this. Riveting stuff. So we're into the sabotage method, I guess, now. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. Juicy, yeah. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's just a very basic understanding for the novice. You pull the control column back, elevator goes up, push the control column forward, elevator goes down, nose goes down. Very simple, straightforward. That's how the elevators work. Next slide, please. Okay, so I gotta look a little closer here. So this picture gives you an idea of the area that we're talking about, where the sabotage happens. So the top picture of a later model Liberator, but the same tail configuration. So you can see the trailing edge, you can see the elevator, and then to the right of that, you can see the stationary fairing. So the elevator moves, stationary fairing is stationary. And where you see the yellow circle, this is where there's a bit of an alcove there, and that is where the rag is inserted. And there's a bit of a torque tube hinge there. Picture below, in essence, the rag migrated back rearward towards the as the elevator narrowed, and there's a bit of a gap there, and you'll see it in the next picture. As the airspeed built up, it eventually compacted in that location and quickly locked up the elevator. Next photo, please. Okay, so there's a better image of it. So again, At the top, you can see the two yellow lines, stationary fairing attached to the fuselage. To the left, elevator with the red lines. The circle to the right, you can see the U channels. Picture the image below it. Again, you can see the two blue lines up and down of the elevator. And then to the right of that, you can see how the green rag gets compacted in these U channels, and believe me, that locks it up really, really tight. You might as well just put a block of wood in there. And that's essentially what it looks like. Like, you know, that's part of the drawings that I sent to Garth. But of course, he was like, okay, that's very nice. You know, can you prove it? So next photo. So here's just this is a picture of the replica that I built. On the left side, we're looking forward from the rear end. You can see how it's locked up in the replica. You can see the U channels. And then the picture on the right, that's looking towards the rear of the aircraft. Same thing. You can see how the rag is all locked up there. Next pic. And I think the next one is going to be the video. Yeah, if you could play that video, please.
Yep, let's do that. Here we go. Hang on. Right.
So that was for about 20 seconds. They only flew 16 seconds, and it's likely that that locking up happened in the last 7 to 8 seconds of flight. So Prchal did not have a lot of time to react.
Excellent stuff.
And it's also worth pointing out, when the rag is put in initially, that is quite a large cavity, and it's quite easy to poke it in there. But on a pre-flight check, obviously the elevator would work normally, you know, running through the controls pre-flight. And also it'd be very, very difficult to spot with a torch. Say you're going around pre-flight checks with a torch, unless you knew it was there, to get up and have a look and have a feel around, you would not know it's there. You just would not know it's there. And as Chris said, as the aircraft gained speed on takeoff, that would have migrated down to the narrow end. And obviously as it got down there, it would have compressed.
Yeah.
Okay. The questions are building up, but I'm going to hold on because I think you're going to answer some of them as you're coming along. It's the critical point of the show where people are like, but surely, but which is good. I'll back to you guys. And yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting now. I'm enthralled. Get back to you.
No, I appreciate it. Okay, so the big question: why place a cotton rag in the elevator? So, post-publication research. I was going to make a comment about that. We're at 41. Okay, so the sabotage method and the location, it's not an obvious or a logical choice. You're going to use a rag, you know, it's you're going to do something like contaminate the fuel system, oil system, fuel systems, oil systems, or carburetors. So contaminants or a rag, you know, was a tried and true method used by European resistance groups, the SOE and the OSS, to contaminate or FOD, you know, these systems. And again, I looked in the training manual, so they make reference to, you know, how to contaminate, engines. So you'd also use like things like sand, dirt, grass, metal shavings, soap, sugar, whatever, to contaminate these systems. Next slide, please. So we also kind of wondered, you know, why was an explosive not used? So just to kind of backtrack a little bit before the events of July 3rd happened. So on June 30th, 1943, there was an explosion and a catastrophic fire at the Gibraltar dockyard fuel and oil storage facility, and the bomb had been set by a Spanish saboteur. And oddly enough, that explosion and fire was a quarter mile from the governor's residence, where Sikorsky was going to be lodged on the 4th and the 5th. And now, of course, you know, staff, security staff, you know, the governor himself is wondering, you know, is the resident at risk? Are we, you know, is it another target? There had been a lot of sabotage attempts being made on Gibraltar coming across this, because they had a Spanish workforce that would come across every day to work in all kinds of places. Also, too, of course, they had the issue with the Italian frogmen. So there were always sabotage attempts being made. The British had actually infiltrated their little organization, but you know, the odd saboteur got through. So Gibraltar's security forces were on alert for sabotage attacks. Anyone attempting basically it was made clear that anyone attempting to destroy military infrastructure would on conviction suffer death. It's speculated that this explosion rattled our and again we're speculating, rattled our saboteur, because so the plan to place the bomb was going to be unworkable. You know, why would one of Sikorsky's security be carrying an explosive device with him? If he was caught, it's curtains for him. So, and again, as was pointed out earlier, guards have been posted inside and outside of AL523. The aircraft, the airport was also it was a 24/7. It was very busy, and this kind of helped thwart any attempts. Next slide, please. So, and again, the use of a cotton rag, you know, points to an intention to FOD one of those systems I'd mentioned earlier. And he likely was unable to FOD these systems due to the technical complexity of access. These locations were, you know, 10 to 12 feet on top of the Liberator, requiring a tall ladder or internal access, you know, going into the fuselage and then out, you know, through emergency escape hatches. And again, there was one guard inside and one guard on the outside. Next slide, please. So here's just a quick diagram of the Liberator 2. And as you can see at the bottom, from the top of the wing to the fuselage, top of wing and fuselage is 12 feet above the ground. So you're going to stand out. You know, again, if you have some Polish security guard, why do you need to get inside the aircraft? Why are you walking on top of the aircraft? What are you doing? You know, anyway, next picture, please. Okay, so again, these locations were not targeted for several possible reasons. Gibraltar security was on high alert after the explosion and fire. The saboteur's duties as a Sikorsky security didn't allow him time. And the Liberator was technically too complex for him. And as I mentioned earlier, the sight of one of his security climbing on top of AL523 would draw attention. And of course, you know, the aircraft and the airfield security was a significant obstacle. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
And again, there's a close-up. You can see there's the pilot's escape hatch. There's the Astrodome, which also served as an escape hatch. Circled in red is the carburetor inlet. And then there's the engine oil filler access, which is beneath some access service panel. Mm. So yeah, it's for a guy to try and pull that off, no, it's not going to happen. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our working theory is that the saboteur randomly wiped the fuselage stains, and he placed the cotton rag up in that U-channel cavity. You know, it was a random act and technically illogical. And we figure he got desperate. You know, his decision was born of desperation, but it was an unanticipated success that, you know, sadly killed Sikorsky. And you have to wonder about the logic of sending a saboteur to assassinate a head of state in a hotbed of espionage such as, you know, Gibraltar. You know, it speaks to a poorly conceived plan that limited, you know, any sabotage efforts. And these factors presumably hamstrung Urbanski, leading him to, you know, to opt for a questionable, you know, well-executed Plan B over a poorly executed Plan A. And actually, I know Garth has some points about that regarding opportunity.
Well, I'm pretty, as an aside to this, I'm pretty keen on researching the SOE, and I've got a keen interest on that. And I've never ever found or seen a document that mentions using a rag to foul any part of an aircraft, you know, control surface of an aircraft, as a form of sabotage. It's not
a vulnerable area.
No, it has to if you know the saboteur did this, it's out of desperation, and it's a Plan B, C, D, or even further down potentially. But this was not a Plan A. There's no one in their right mind would think, I know what I can do. because they'd have to know the aircraft specifically to have those channels. Chris, I don't know what other aircraft would have those channels like that. Even some Liberators don't have those channels. So to do that was a case of, was he up there on a ladder, on a trestle or something like that, and he was just wiping over, and he thought, what am I doing? And then he did that. But I do not think that for 1 minute that was a plan A, B, or even C. It could have been plan D for we know. But one thing we do know is that Urbanski was good at his job, good at what he did, and is a very determined individual. So, this is someone that can think on their feet, work alone, and, very, very, the mindset on having, completing his mission. And I don't dispute that for 1 minute.
I mean, my sorry to interrupt. I feel it's a bit weirdly suspicious. If you put me in an airfield with a Liberator and you gave me a selection of items from my pockets, a cloth, a coin, or whatever, the chances of me being able to get to an aircraft and randomly, as a last resort, put something somewhere and bring an aircraft down, it's kind of 1,000,000 to 1, isn't it? I mean, I know that's what causes accidents. It is 1,000,000 to 1 things that bring down things all the time. But that right now, I'm feeling that's a fucking lucky break for him.
Well, exactly. I mean, you're looking at the Swiss cheese model here, aren't you? With all the fail safes put into place, and then just so happens that worked. I mean, this is desperation. And the only thing I can assume, and this is totally, again, I can only assume, we don't know this for sure, is, as Chris said, he was at the aircraft, rag in hand, thinking, how am I going to bring this thing down? What am I going to do? Where can I do something? And then eventually just like, look, if I'll do this is my last resort. It's all I can think of. It's all I can do. I'm here now. Let me just shove this rag in and see what happens. And in my view, well, we do know that there are other contributing factors to that aircraft that, in my view, only Prchal could have got that aircraft to lift off the ground that night anyway, which again points to how good a pilot he was. But then this was just the last slice of the Swiss cheese that, made that, so you had that alignment, and then the aircraft was coming down. But, he was, for that aircraft to come down, because he put that rag there, was luck, a lot of luck involved. And there's lots of things along the way that lined up for that. That one thing on its own, not so sure about, but there's lots of things that lined up to that, and it definitely wasn't that.
It also kind of, sorry.
I was going to say, let's plow through the presentation then, because the questions are building up, and it's all very cool stuff. And then that way we're not asking things before they're covered. So back to you, Chris.
Okay, so the contraband controversy, liquor and VIPs being exception to rules. That's 55. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so of the many things that were recovered from the aircraft, and there was a lot. There's a lot of personal items recovered. Of note was a box of Leica cameras, money, and a pistol found amongst the underwater debris. The Leica cameras, actually, they were obtained for the Polish Ministry of Information. The money was from from the ex-Polish embassy in Kubashev that was being conveyed to Iran. And then we spoke about it earlier, but there's no documented recovery of liquor, but from 2 accounts, and again, we spoke about them earlier, Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Scrope, told by ground crew of boxes of sherry loaded on AL523 and of confrontation. We have Stoker First Class Sidney Knowles. He was a Royal Navy clearance diver who dived on AL523. He alleges to have seen liquor crates in the wreckage. His account is a little bit dubious. He had a habit of embellishing things. He's kind of he tried to claim that he knew why Buster Crabbe was killed in the 1950s. But and lastly, we have Jack Waterfield and his testimony. He also made it clear that pilots frequently purchased whiskey, and that Spitfire pilots would put whiskey bottles in their gunwales. Can't say I blame them. Okay, next slide, please. And here's just a sample of the telex that was sent from the Polish liaison officer in Gibraltar, and you can see near the bottom. He makes the statement that sending cameras by air to Ministry of Information, according to Winzik's statement recovered money belongs to the ex-embassy in Kibyshev, and there's a sample of a Leica camera. Next slide, please. And from the Polish Institute and Sikorsky Museum, here's just a partial list, a sample of personal items that were recovered. And of course, unique is the Mauser pistol that was found with 8 cartridges in it, 2 steel wrist watches, silver cigarette case with an autograph of General Sikorsky. That cigarette case actually had been a gift to Prchal, and it was given back to him later on after when he recovered. Okay, so there's testimony that that VIPs flaunted rules, and so there was a question asked of Squadron Leader Sack of number 511 Squadron. He was asked, "Have you noticed any tendency to relax regulations when carrying very important passengers?" He said, "Yes, there have been on occasion within my experience when VIPs have refused to conform to regulations," and that is number 59. Okay, yeah, next. So just to add to that, post-publication research, I've uncovered several pre- and post-crash references to VIPs having viewing themselves as exception to the rules. Prior to this crash in January 1943, Churchill had insisted that he needed to depart Gibraltar in bad weather. And he had tried to pressure his pilot to, young man, I need to get to the UK, and the pilot refused. And then in February and April of 1945, the issue of VIPs, being exceptions, making themselves exceptions to the rules, was raised in the UK Parliament regarding VIPs, and again, incidents of pilots pressuring. Of VIPs pressuring pilots to undertake flights that were unsafe, basically weather, things like that. All right, the conspiracy makers. Captain Jerzy Klimkowski. So this chap, he is the one person who is documented to have uttered threats against Sikorsky's life in the Middle East. He had made statements to the effect that if Sikorsky came to the Middle East, there's a chance he might get assassinated. He was the aide-de-camp to General Anders in the Middle East, and he led an anti-Sikorsky faction in the Polish Second Corps. He was arrested after Sikorsky's death, and he was imprisoned in the UK. Not so much for his death, but because he was an agitator. After the war, he went back to Poland, and he just became an agitator for the Polish government in exile. In 1965, he published in Poland a book called The Disaster in Gibraltar and Behind the Scenes of General Sikorsky's Death. And he alleged that Churchill had sanctioned Sikorsky's assassination. And he alleged that the pilot had been given the co-pilot was a special British agent who crashed the aircraft, jumped out, swam away, and that the surviving pilot, Prchal, was complicit. Next slide, please. And of course, David Irving, and his 1967 book, Accident. He accused the crew and the passengers of smuggling liquor and contraband, and we know there was some contraband being conveyed. As to them being being a smuggling operation, no, it's just that VIPs, they saw themselves exceptions to the rule. He suggested that the Gibraltar crash, the Montreal accident, and the Mid-Atlantic incendiary bomb scare were all connected. They were not. That's just how did I phrase that a certain way? 62. Yeah, that's just the common aviation hazards of the day. They weren't assassination attempts. And then in his German language revision, he removed references to smuggling and overloading and alleged the crash was an assassination plot approved by Churchill. And he also incorporated elements of Klimkowski's 1965 book in his conspiracy narrative. Next slide, please. Rolf Hochholz, his 1967 play Soldiers, alleged that Churchill had ordered the death of Sikorsky and that the pilot had deliberately crashed AL523. He alleged Sikorsky had been killed and axed to death by 4 frogmen at the end of the runway, and that the pilot Prchal was complicit. and he incorporated elements of Klimkowski's story in his conspiracy claims. He also claimed that he had a secret document located in a Swiss vault that he'd put in a Swiss vault for 50 years, proving British complicity. This kind of sparked the myth of the British files that sparked the myth of secret British files that still persist to this day. In 2016, no secret document came to light. In the end, he told his biographer that the allegation of Churchill being responsible for Sikorsky's death was based on a rumor from his publisher's wife, Jan Lidig Roholt. There was no secret document. So,
wow.
And I was going to add, no, okay, carry on. So, shaking the tree. So we've had some new eyewitnesses come forward. Just a sample of some of the stuff that we've been discovered and people coming forward. Is there anything? We're almost near the end. Is there anything you want to maybe
answer some questions?
Yeah.
The questions, I think we'll do it. We'll do at the end. I think. I mean, I think we'll splash on through to the end of the slides. Then we'll do with them. It's brilliant stuff.
Okay, so we've had some people come forward. We have our families have come forward with information. So we have leading aircraftman Sykes. He was an RAF fitter, and he kept a diary, and he had entries about his time on Gibraltar assembling Spitfires, and and he mentioned the post-crash condition of AL523's recovered wreckage. We have another witness after that. We have Flight Sergeant Sosinski. He was a Polish airman. He was part of a 3-man Polish investigative team that was sent to Gibraltar. And Sosinski was tasked to investigate the condition of the pilot escape hatch found recovered in the wreckage. And we have one last fellow. And this guy is very interesting. Second Lieutenant Balanda, Polish ex-POW. Post-war, he was recruited by MI5, MA6. He was an agent with them, tracking Nazis in Germany, Nazis who were trying to hide in Germany, and there was also a concern that they were trying to come back, and so the British were tracking them down. He was later sent to Australia at the start of the Cold War in 1950 to monitor Nazi and Soviet activity for ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organization, from the 50s to the 70s. He surveilled Saboteur Urbanski during this period, having learned of his connection to Sikorsky's death. This poor fellow, he spent almost 3 years in concentration camps. He spent 2.5 years in Neumagen and 10 months at Sachsenhausen. And his story is quite tragic, but he managed to survive and start a family in Australia. But yeah, so those are our some of the new information we've uncovered, eyewitnesses. And of course, last but not least, our research is not ended. The search continues for new eyewitnesses and information.
Well, I mean, a lot to unpack there. Before I give my thoughts, let's go through some of the questions. So we had quite a few early on about the engines. So here are the examples. So Terry said, engine stopped. How could that happen from just a piece of cloth in the central control surfaces? And then someone else said that about Roderick said no lift due to elevator malfunction, but why did the engines quit? So engines.
Prchal shut them down. He closed the throttles. That's it. There was nothing else he could do. He just closed the throttles, shut them down. The rag had nothing to do with the engine stopping. He just shut the engines down. It's just part of a crash landing in the water. That's all that was.
Yes, just a part of the ditching. Yeah, the engines didn't stop. Yeah, he shut them down.
Okay. He is basically along for the ride.
That's all he could do. He had nothing else he could do to shut them down.
Okay. So we got another couple of questions about the seemingly kind of rushed getting the aircraft ready and taking off. So again, Terry says you were starting the engines before you finished loading. Is that normal? And he also said doesn't sound like a very controlled or professional loading and pre-takeoff. Is this sort of because of the VIP nature and the fact there's a little bit of protocols going on and the fact they're bringing on some liquor maybe? Does anything about that sound untoward?
Yeah, the thing is, let's just build a picture here. So the ground crew, everyone's prepped the aircraft.
Yep.
Sikorsky is now getting on board. He's very tired. He's had a very long day. The pre-flight checks have been done. Engines are wound up. They're started. Everything seems to be good and in position and on time when two Tilly trucks come across the apron, pull up alongside the aircraft, and start unloading the sherry. Which were like, where's this coming from? Don't worry about it. Just load it. Some people knew about it, some people didn't. And it was quite, like I said, quite fraught and chaotic as they realized that there was a lot of it to go on board and it just wasn't the space. They were shifting things around, moving stuff around. And while all this was going on, the rest of the passengers hadn't even boarded at this point. It was that chaotic. We know that from eyewitness that a Polish officer pulled his pistol and was waving that around and said, come on, let's speed this up, speed it up. We know Chris has looked into it and said perhaps not, or that isn't the case, but we, from Jack Waterfield, he was colleagues stood next to him, he said those engines are getting very, very hot now. His terminology is they're red hot. We know the center of gravity was changing by the minute, and bearing in mind, Prchal's in the pilot seat. He's doing pre-flight checks, he's ready to go. And if that was me, I would think this is going to head south the way it's going. The amount they're putting on board, the way this is going, it's all getting fraught. And if I'd never worn a Mae West vest before, I would put it on because I'm thinking this could end up in the drink. Let me put my Mae West on and seat the pants. Let's hope we get this aircraft off the tarmac. Now, again, he would have taxied, he would have done pre-flight checks, checked all the elevators and everything. They would have seemed okay, maybe a little stiff, but good to go. Taken off, and as he was rumbling down the runway, of course, he wouldn't have rotated at that point. So that's as that rag is going down to the narrow end of the elevator, then cause problem. And of course, by that time, he just pulls up a little bit. He's got his own style of takeoff, remember. He'd pull up quite sharply and then drop the nose to gain speed. And obviously, as he's doing this, that rag is getting more and more forced, more and more stuck at the end of the elevator. And in the end, the aircraft's just going to go where it's pointed. And all he can do is just shut the engines off. So it was very chaotic at the time. There were people, the flight that was waiting to take off after him, they actually, some of them unboarded and went over and were going to sort of complain and say, what's the holdup? What's going on here? And they were intercepted by ground crew that said, yeah, don't worry about it. Sikorsky is just holding us all up. And it was due to that loading of the sherry, which no one knows the exact weight of the sherry. No one, this was a thing with Sikorsky. He did hold sherry parties. This was a thing that he did do. And this wasn't the first time either that we're talking to contraband here. There was other contraband on board as well that other people got on there. But this was a lot of weight, with an aircraft that's, again, we don't know. But Chris has done lots of, Chris, do you want to talk about what you've done in terms of calculations on weight and the takeoff distance down the runway? You don't think it was that heavy?
So because it was a successful takeoff, and he used up the amount of runway that he used was not excessive. I've calculated that he was probably at his max, 56,000 pounds, and that his center of gravity was probably center of gravity for that aircraft on the Liberator. They refer to a term called mean aerodynamic chord. It's just an area on the wing that is about 15 inches long, and the center of gravity kind of shifts in there. And it was probably somewhere in the region of 27 to 28%, and which is fine. And had that aircraft been like 61, 62, 63,000 pounds, which some of our conspiracy theorists have suggested, and including a very well-known Polish aerospace engineer, had that aircraft been that heavy, it would have went off the end of the runway and down onto the beach. It had never gotten off the ground.
Do you think they were Prchal flying? If anyone could, he could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the takeoff technique, it was typical for him. It was not unusual. Nobody questioned it. I think actually a lot of pilots did use this technique of pulling up aggressively and then climbing and then dumping the nose to build up airspeed and then get out, because Gibraltar only had the one runway. The other thing too, a lot of people don't realize, and you look at the map, the last 270 feet of the runway was under construction, was closed. and he managed to get that aircraft off, you know, quite effortlessly. Now he does admit that in after the war, when he was interviewed by Carlos Thompson, that the aircraft felt sluggish, which indicated that it was heavy. So, as for the chaotic loading, it was really hard to draw an accurate picture as just how that loading was done. When you review the three eyewitnesses, certainly Mr. Walker, he doesn't make any mention about any chaos or engines running. Same thing with Jack Waterfield. Again, he does make mention of the engines running, but he makes no mention. But he doesn't really say much else other than the fact that he saw the daughter, Sikorsky's daughter, Sophia, looking out a window.
Right.
And then, was one last point I was going to make. I think that's all I'm going to say. Yeah, that's all I can recall. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. So Terry asked another question, and that is there any kind of independent corroboration for Urbanski's story, documents, other witnesses? Because, I mean, it sounds very compelling, but yeah, the question there, is there anything else to back up that? I mean, obviously we have the aircraft going down, something has to bring the aircraft down, but anything else?
Up until we got in contact with the son of Second Lieutenant Belanda, up until then, all me and Garth could do was champion the method. Right. Okay. And now with Mr. Belanda's being aware that Sikorsky was that Urbanski was responsible, that kind of adds a little bit of credence to his story. All we can do is kind of just refer to what was written about or written by Urbanski's son.
Right.
And that I can guarantee you that if I had not been able to replicate the jamming, you know, on a replica elevator, we would not be having this conversation. We would have never published the book. It was important for us to publish this and get the information out to shake the tree.
Yeah.
Because all the other conspiracy theories are done. They're done. They're null and void. They're done. So, okay, what's next? The rag in the elevator. Okay, it's another conspiracy. Let's see what. Oh, hang on. There's legs to this. It works. You know. So that's as far as we've got. You know, that's as far as we've got with that. Yes, we've got a name. Yes, this idea came from that person with the name. But that's as far as we've got. Is it doable? Yes, it is. Was it Urbanski? We don't know, and we'd love to prove yes or no with that. You know, and with the help of other people, hopefully, eventually we will do that.
One curious thing about this fellow Belanda is that there is a very large ASIO file on him. That is when I was talking to his son, like, you know, it's like a book, and it's all redacted. And anyway, it's very interesting. It's the closest we've come to actually confirming the saboteur's story. You know, we do not presume to have a monopoly on the truth. You know, as we said before, we're trying to shake the tree. You know, our research, theory, and our conclusions, we arrived at logically, you know, with the best available information. You know, it's by no means definitive. And again, we believe it to be a logical theory that debunks many myths.
Yeah.
And yes, there's still questions regarding means and motive and evidence that this has been put to me as well. And we acknowledge that, you know, that it's controversial, you know, and you know, it's the reason why we wrote the book.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, Garth has been pushing this as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm coming at this fairly fresh, apart from the research I've done for the show, and it seems that in some ways, the overloaded nature of the aircraft, the liquor, that kind of thing, is in some ways a distraction from the sabotage. They're complementary, but at the same time, they're pulling in different directions as well as the same direction. Paradoxically, it's like if it was one thing or the other, you'd have a kind of a line of inquiry to follow, but they're weirdly contradicting each other at the same time, backing each other up. And I think I'm always thinking of the fact that with this kind of project, it's not necessarily that you had to prove that a thing happened. It's the fact that you're disproving that other things happened. You know, it's it might actually be impossible to actually determine what brought the aircraft down definitively. All you can do is eliminate as many possibilities as you can.
Yeah,
you've made a compelling case that the rag theory could bring the aircraft down. The model you went to, you've proved that. And as you say, now I think I like your expression of shaking the tree now and seeing, okay, here's where we are right now. And I always go, in my arguments about different things, I always say it's okay to say you don't know about something. So okay, so at this moment we don't know this bit. This is the bit that is still a mystery. We don't know. We hope to find out, but you might not find out until you can eliminate more things, if that makes sense.
It's the only thing that stands ground. It's the only thing that's got, remotely not proof, but is feasible. We've proven that method is feasible, whereas all the conspiracy theories we proved wasn't the case. The mailbag that fell out through the nose wheel on taxiing, that was just because they were throwing the mail everywhere because of all the liquor and the crates of liquor everywhere. Different witnesses we talked to say it was too heavy. Different witnesses we talked to say the engines were overheated. We know about the May West that he was wearing. The reason, if that was me, I'd put that on thinking this, the chaos. So yes, they are all independently and nothing to do with the rag. But if you look at the Swiss cheese model, and each one is a slice of cheese, and you hold it up, you can see right through it, which would bring that aircraft down. But again, like Chris said, we haven't got a monopoly on the truth, and we just would love to know more and find out more.
Yeah. I'll further add to that. We've also kind of I've read and I've heard that there's some kind of conspiracy of silence regarding about the contraband, the smuggling of contraband by VIPs. I don't think it was so much a conspiracy of silence. It was more a case of just it was accepted. It was quietly accepted. It's what they call nowadays in aircraft accident investigation, normalization of deviance. It's just what people did back then. And you still get that today. And it's sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. I do firmly believe that everybody knew that yes, there was contraband on board, but that's just what VIPs did. It wasn't a big cover up. They just understood that that's what VIPs did. But at the same time, we're not going to sully a world leader's name and make ourselves look stupid. The court of inquiry. That's kind of a simplistic way of putting it, but yeah.
No, I mean, I love a show on this channel that raises as many questions as it answers, and I think you've answered some. You've dismissed certain things that are hokum and nonsense, but you've also raised a question. But we're left with the fact that an aircraft did go down off that coast very quickly after takeoff. That is in somewhat unusual circumstances, and all you can do is keep on trying to narrow the focus down and eliminate as many unlikely scenarios as possible. And in that kind of Sherlock Holmes way, that if you eliminate all the possibilities, the one you're left with becomes the truth. Although I think there are problems with that as a premise, but in this situation, I think that's all you can do. Is it? That's all you just keep on working at it. Eliminate things, add new bits in evidence and information as you find them, and then, yes, as the old adage says, see where the evidence takes you, because that seems to be what you're doing. The fact there's two of you working on this, opposite sides of the Atlantic, is that you've been it's given it a bit of an academic rigor because you're coming at it from slightly different directions. If it was one person squirreling away in his basement, I'd be initially kind of okay, but the fact you're trying to prove each other wrong, which is the way to do it, isn't it? Essentially.
Yeah, and nothing as well. I mean, the Polish authorities know about this. They know about our book. They know about our theories. They know about this, right? We haven't been contacted. No one has contacted us directly. No one has said anything. So we either got it very right or very wrong. We're either crackpots and got it very wrong and no one wants to talk to us, or we got it very right. Let's try and keep it a bit quiet. I don't know, but we've had no one's approached us over this.
Yeah, no, we appreciate, that it is controversial. The crash is controversial. Our theory is controversial, and we understand that. We totally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we should leave it. Really, is you're not just presenting a theory with no substance and saying that's it, this is it, take it. you're opening it up, you're being humble about it and saying this, we haven't eliminated this, we've worked out this is possible, we've done that, we've got these accounts, and there you are. You're presenting your evidence. Well, not, I mean, theories, evidence, it's all the same thing. So what is there one?
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I'll just add one more thing. So when we first approached the publisher Grub Street, and they read it, they liked what they saw, and they politely asked, we're not an academic publisher. We'd really prefer not to include all the citations. And I had to push back and said, look, I'd really appreciate if you left them in, because it's quite an extensive bibliography and an even more extensive citation list, because I wanted to show people that I did my homework, or we did our homework. Here's the material. Here's all the material that we found. And most of it can be found either online or by going to an archive and getting copies. The information is out there. And when you shake the tree hard enough, next thing you know, we have people coming forward, like guys like Belanda.
So, yeah. What would be if you could wake up tomorrow with one dream bit of paperwork or document or contact? Do you even know at this point? Do you know what it is that you're looking for that would be the smoking gun, so to speak, or are you're not even in that area quite?
Oh, good question.
I would like to see the saboteur's name on a passenger list, because there were I think there were like 5 different British and American squadrons that flew. That transport squadrons that flew in and out of Gibraltar. I would love to see his name on a passenger list.
Right, but he wouldn't.
I've only been able to. There's only 2 squadrons that have names on passenger lists, and there's a third. I think 511 squadron had names, but it was only for names for VIPs.
Right.
So,
and what name would he have used? What name would he have used anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Garth, from your point of view, what would be the thing you'd love to wake up with tomorrow morning?
A dossier on Wroblewski with everything in it. That would, but because he was a very quiet man, and there's a different story again about what the sort of person he was, and he wasn't about talking about these sort of things as they don't. So is very verbal, a lot of left with memories and stuff like that. But a nice dossier on him would be absolutely great at this point.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, we will leave things there. It's left me scratching my head about this, and the work I'm doing on my book now seems really easy compared to what you've done on your book. So it's boosted. At least I know what it is I'm writing about.
Welcome to our world.
Yeah, no, I don't think I want to be part of your world. I'm glad you're living in your world and you're just presenting your findings to me. So yeah, well, folks, I said I put the QR code up there, take you to the Grub Street Publishers, or you can find it wherever you buy your books. You can contact either Garth or Chris collectively or together, and that'll be really cool. So brilliant talking to you two guys. I've got a show tomorrow. We're talking about the girl bandits who were part of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising in Poland in 1943. So same year, different subject. I'm looking forward to that. As always, buy my guests' books, read their blogs, look at their work so they continue working towards more projects in the future. Chris, Garth, fantastic stuff. There's your copy there. Brilliant stuff. I'll speak to you again when my brain has stopped hurting, because you've given me a lot of stuff. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Paul.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.